is gonna be my room,
Mm-hmm.
my little space to do this and create space for other people, and so I was just really excited to get this going.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, ready to jump into it?
Yeah.
Great.
So
all right.
let's make sure. Am I like in
the frame?
Yeah,
All in the frame. You don't
awesome.
need to move anywhere. It's like this kind of like whole area right here.
Yeah.
And first of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you driving all the way up here and allowing me to do this. And thank you to Dr. Tasha as well to reaching out to multiple people for me, which I think was just a beautiful gesture for her to do that. And to start off, usually I like people to introduce themselves, kind of tell a little bit about what they do, and then we'll kind of just move into that space. So go ahead.
Sounds great. Yeah. So I'd like to lead with, I am a multi-dimensional being of complexity.
Okay.
There's a lot to me, and so on top of that, I really like to lead to like who I am as a person first and foremost before going into professionally like who I am, because it's only one dimension or facet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so multi-dimensional being of complexity. I'm a really big earth enthusiast. I'm really connected to the earth. I love being outside within nature. I'm really connected to plants, to animals, all the four-legged, two-legged, the winged ones. Love all of just like life, and I really have found that like I feel most like myself when I am outside and amongst nature. It's really where like I feel the most at home and at peace. In addition to that, I would say like I'm an artist of sorts, a musician, so I sing, as well as like play the ukulele and play flutes, the Native American flute specifically, and that's only a more recently developed skill, I would say, for me. Not even a skill, just like a passion of mine. I always have loved music through my life, but really over the last couple years, as I've deepened my own healing practice and process, I have just this gift has blossomed in a way for me. So I've just learned a lot about how to maneuver the ins and outs of instruments and playing music from like a deeper, more authentic, sincere, and spiritual place, I would say. So I do a lot of songwriting. A lot of the music that I write too is oriented around a lot of my own journeys, whether it's sitting in ceremony with plant medicine specifically, or sitting in shamanic journeys, or even just going deep into meditation and working through my own process of healing to curate and create a lot of beautiful teachings and lessons that I then translate into music and then into song, obviously. So I'm really passionate about that. That's like a more recent development over the last couple of years. And what else? Yeah, I love like spending time just being amongst really good company. Being in authentic alignment and connection with people matters a lot to me, and it really feeds my soul too. Hence also why I think I've gone into the work that I have too. It's one dimension of it. Is I really love being around people. And while I would describe myself as an omnivore, I definitely receive a lot at the same time from being amongst people that really allow me to be fully an expression of myself and who I am, and also be able to hold that space for people to meet me there and be in their most sincere embodiment too.
Great.
So on a personal level, that's who I am, I would say. On a professional level, I've been trained as a traditional psychotherapist. I've been doing that for I started my own private practice in 2020, but I've been working in the mental health field, supporting people since 2014, 2013, since college. It's like where I started doing, it's been a long time, like over 10 years at this point. I've been in the field of serving people. And I could go into all the different positions I worked in, but just to like summarize it, because that's a whole nother tangent. I really started this work and pursuing this path of supporting people from a place of like wanting to help people heal in the mental health from my own personal experiences that I've had in my life, specifically with family, that really have that really inspired me to want to figure out how can I like serve people and support people in the way that I know my family members have needed it, and that I've like informally like assumed that responsibility and role in my family to help support people. And that eventually translated into me getting really interested in psychology and then pursuing a degree in psychology with a minor in women and gender studies when I went to college. And then at the same time, really doing all sorts of internships and pursuing a lot of different job positions that were oriented around helping people heal. Whether it was like working at a domestic violence shelter or serving as a personal aide for a teenager who was on the spectrum, working on multiple research teams who were conducting clinical research trials related to clinical psychology and a variety of different concepts. And then fast forward after college, got my first big girl job working at a psych hospital, which was a horrible experience, but that was my introduction in a real way to community-based mental health and like the disaster that essentially it is in our country and unfortunately in the majority of the world.
Yeah, I was gonna say, all over the place.
All over the world, exactly. And so that was like the first introduction I had into like, this is like what it means to do this work in the current confines of the systems that are in place to quote unquote help people, right? And so I started doing that and I was like, this is not it. And then I went through a lot of really unexpected traumatic things as a result of my dad unexpectedly getting diagnosed with terminal cancer while I was still working there. And so I took an LOA and I went to Brazil and took care of him and essentially like guided him and stewarded him through the process of dying, which was a huge initiatory experience for me. And it happened when I was like, at that point, 23. Not even 23, no. I was like literally, I had turned 22. And I was like at the same time, like also figuring out like what I was going to do with my life.
Very transitionary.
Age, exactly. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And then this is happening and like job's not important. I'm just here to support him. And then when he passed, I was like, at the same time, I had also been applying to social work school and like different graduate programs because I was like, this is the only way that I'm going to be able to get out of the shithole that is essentially community-based mental health and like actually do what I want to do and impact people at a larger scale in the way that I want to, where I don't have to exist in the confines of these systems anymore and actually work for myself and create something that's far more embodied, far more liberatory for people. And so what I essentially did was like, took a hiatus there for that summer and then I went to social work school. And from there, like pursued a variety of different like volunteer-based positions within community-based mental health. And eventually after graduate school landed my first gig in private practice at a very cushy private practice in Washington, DC. It was very nice and prestigious and I was both the clinical program manager and then a clinician. So I was doing clinical work with clients, but also helping run the program, which was ideal for me because eventually I wanted to work for myself. So I got to figure out like the ins and outs of what it meant to like actually have my own practice while also getting clinical experience. And a lot of that practice was oriented around brain and body-based therapy. So a lot of nonverbal therapies that were really focused on helping people reprocess trauma in their nervous system, in their body, using things like somatic experiencing, sensory motor psychotherapy, brain spotting, EMDR, neurofeedback, all of these things that I'm just being exposed to, which really opened up my interest and desire to further pursue more holistic, integrative approaches to psychotherapy and to healing. And so that sort of led me into diving more deeply into that. I got trained in yoga. I've got my yoga teacher training certification. I got trained in Reiki, Asui Shiki Ryoho Reiki. So I was just diving into all these different dimensions, as well as brain spotting. I was also getting trained in that. And then I was like, it's always just coming full circle and it was beautiful and it felt more holistic, it felt more integrated and aligned, but then it just also fell short in this whole other dimension that I was very passionate about as a result of being really exposed to spirituality at a very young age because my dad lived in Brazil and there was a lot of things I was exposed to early on, even before he moved to Brazil. He essentially just widened my gaze into understanding there's so much more to this world than that I can see. And so I was like, these things are hitting the mark, but like they're also missing this huge other piece and dimension of healing, which is like healing through spirit. And then, as things always do, it was cushy and exciting for a while, and then my life fell apart again at the end of 2020. And that included Me like ending my almost 6-year relationship where like we were about to like get engaged. It included me getting fired from this group practice and like going through a lot of like legal issues and drama related to that, and then also at the same time being like just receiving the very clear messaging. It's like, and it's now time for you to start your business and your practice at the same time. So all of that culminated into one moment at the end of 2020. Mind you, also the pandemic was happening.
Yep.
So like there's that layer of the intensity. And so I started my private practice then, which is Sacred Space. And it really since then has been just like such a deep culmination and of everything that I've learned through my life on a personal level, through all the trainings that I have done professionally and continue to do, because learning is an ongoing process as well as healing, and it never stops, which has really led me to here. So I'm like almost 4 years into my private practice now, and it's evolved, and it is continuing to evolve and grow in ways like I could have not ever expected. But I also know as in like the most deep alignment with what I'm meant to bring in the world to essentially help people heal, which is not just like focusing on the psychological or the mental. It's not just focusing on the emotional. It's not just focusing like on the body or the physical. It's not just focusing on the spirit. It's like focusing on all 4 of those dimensions in one specific container and doing it like really with a deep level of integrity and sincerity, to help people get free, to help people like come back home to themselves, which is why I'm here. It's a big part of why I'm here. There's a whole other reason why I'm here, which we can talk about in a moment, but that's my long-winded answer of my introduction.
That was great. Thank you. That was like so well done. That was like, I had like, oh my gosh, so many different questions in the midst of that. Like, it's even hard to respond at this point. But I had one at the very beginning,
yes.
And when you first started off, because I felt in a strange way that led me to my path was like kind of like this predestined path, if you will, that like our sacred ancestors kind of like put you in alignment, if you will. Like you were saying that, you know, you saw different things within your family dynamic, and that led you to this path because they kind of told you in a weird sense that this is your role, you know. And I felt that my entire life, like with my parents and a lot of different people around me, though I didn't want to be. I felt like a counselor since I was like 10 years old.
Exactly.
You know, to my parents who got married like really young and had all kind of convoluted like issues within their relationship, and then so many people around me too. And then after a while, by the time I was like 12 years old, people were asking me like, what should I do in my relationship? And I was like, you know, like I have no idea, you know. But it's funny that, you know, they kind of, you know, however you'd like to explain it. And I'm sure there's many different avenues that you can take for the meaning behind all of that. It's interesting when you said you were kind of like set forth at that time. Then obviously the culmination of all the healing and loss and everything has kind of led you to where you are now. But I always think it's interesting to look back when you have those moments where you're like, I was deciding, but in a weird way, the universe was already like rolling me in that direction, and then I was gonna pinball around into where I got to where I'm at. Do you ever like look back and feel that sometimes that it was already like set forth for you in a weird way?
Oh yeah. And I mean, what I believe, and this is just like, you know, my personal beliefs, but also as a result of things that have been reinforced and like shown to me in my life experiences, is that like this was what I was meant to do long before I actually came here in body.
Yes.
And like the seeds that planted these threads that essentially like created the ball and like propelled it into motion that led me to this moment, like that all needed to happen in the way that it happened for me to arrive at this place. Like the level of synchronicities in my life of understanding like all the different key dimensions and pieces that like needed to so specifically and uniquely come together in very specific moments to like up level me, if you will, like take me to through the next layer of like unearthing and uncovering like why I'm actually here. It all needed to happen in the way that it needed to happen, in the time that it needed to happen, because if it was too soon or it was too late, it wouldn't have actually been the propelling force and momentum that I needed to get to that next place. And that started, I think the first time, and I wrote about this recently, but one of the first times I realized this was when I was working at that psychiatric hospital when I had just graduated college, and then my dad finally got diagnosed with cancer. What actually was happening was like I was so miserable in that hellhole of a job, and I was like, I need to get out of here. It's like so not good for my health in every way. And it wasn't only not good for me, it was just like to help and serve people in such a broken system that's only really about monetizing people's pain and illness. It's like I couldn't in good conscience continue to participate in that. And yet, you know, and this is not an exaggeration, yet 250 job applications later, and like over 10 interviews later, where I had like stellar GPA, all of these accolades, all of this experience, where many people told me in interviews that I was overqualified for the position, crickets. Like I never received any offer.
Yeah.
And then what ended up happening, like, was like my dad got diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I was like, this is why I didn't get another job. Because this is the job, right? Like, this is why I was like, I'm going to take an LOA. And I was, you know, whenever I put my mind to something, I'm like, whenever the door opens and it's like, this is what you're supposed to do, things just feel easy and clear, even though it's like one of the most painful things in my life, right? It's like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. Okay, I'm going to pursue it and I'm going to do it and I'm going to go all in and do it. And like, that's what meant to happen. And it was so clear to me in that moment. It was like the universe, like spirit, God, source, whoever, whatever you believe in. It was like that. There was an orchestration happening. It was like, you cannot take another job right now, because if you do, it's going to actually prevent you from showing up for your father in this way, which is like something I deeply through my heart and my humanity wanted to do, but also that was an initiatory experience into propelling me further and deeper onto like my path of development inside and out, to figure out, one, who I am, but like why I'm here, and like to understand like what it means to guide people, like essentially like across that threshold, like through the door of death, and to come face to face with like someone else that I love's own mortality, and thus my own. Like I needed that experience to really like start respecting life in a different way, and also like seeing my life and like my behaviors and the way that I show up in the world, my relationships, as like these portals, these opportunities that really could serve people in such profoundly deep ways. And so that was like only one, that was just the tip of the iceberg, is when I first like consciously started noticing like, okay, that there's more to this than just like bad shit's happening to me, right? There's a reason
Step
for it.
outside yourself.
Yeah.
For sure. I have a little story that I'd like to share.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it kind of like popped into my head. I feel like interrelates to what we're talking about. When my daughter was really young, like probably like 4.5, 5 years old, she told me a story that one day she was talking with God and she was in heaven and she was like looking down and she saw us, like my wife and myself, and she's like, she could see like who she was going to become and all the issues of us and all the problems, and she's like, she saw everything like set before her and decided that she was going to choose us, you know, and the perfect like magic of like everything that we would become as like a family. But it's interesting because in that moment, that, you know, that story, which we never really talked about that stuff with her, like in that detail. She was just like telling us this story. She's still completely connected and channeling to that source on a much higher resonance. And I feel like sometimes when you talk about, you know, making those like pivotal changes, like with your dad and all the decisions that are kind of made and maybe like set forth already, kind of like there, like laid out before you, it's kind of interesting to step outside and look at everything and see the meaning behind of why he decided to leave at that time, to also integrate into your life to become the beautiful person you are now, to help other people, you know, and do that kind of thing too. Because it's so funny, at the exact same age when I was 22 years old, I went through a lot of that kind of same stuff, and I decided to move to India because I had friends that were severely getting into drugs, dying, all kinds of that kind of stuff, you know. And I was like, if I stay here, this could be my life, or I have the opportunity to just literally go the complete opposite direction. And that's what I did. And I was so blessed that I made those types of changes. And so many people don't. They
No,
decide to stick with that path
exactly.
and what have you. But it's always interesting when you look back, those like really pivotal, hard decisions
Yep,
that
it's
are,
a decision.
yeah, that you really encompassed into your life,
Mm-hmm.
sets forth the path that the healing path, not only for yourself, because what I did obviously had to do with so much healing, but it also had to do with so much loss too, because I gave up everything
Yep,
here. Like I sold everything, just left, and I was like, see ya.
absolutely.
You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
amazing at 22 also that I think it's just that really important age
Yep.
where you're making those types of decisions. But I think it's, you know, very important to show that, you know, your father left, and for you to go through all of that is such a blessed thing also,
It
because I
is.
think so many people try and stray away from that
Mm-mm.
in this society, you know, and then to be able to join him with that journey, you
Yeah.
know, is like such an amazing experience too, because it
Yep.
allows you to grow and to internalize so many other things that you know you're going to have to deal with
Yeah.
one of these days, instead of like pushing it away,
Mm-hmm.
which I think we do so often, you
Mm-hmm.
know, here. So I just wanted to share that
No, I appreciate you
really,
sharing that.
really quickly, because I think it all just like, it's all part of like the mold of ourselves and who we become. And
Absolutely.
so yeah, I guess on that note, you know, your father
Mm-hmm.
passing, do you think like, do, obviously it came at the right moment in your life, right? Like, though you look back and you're like, God, it was, I'm sure some parts of it were horrible. It was like the turning point for
Yeah.
you. Like he blessed you in some
Mm-hmm.
strange dynamic to pull you out of like everything that you're dealing with, to
Yeah.
share in his transition,
Totally.
or um, blossoming into
Mm-hmm.
something else, so that you can share in all of that. Do you ever look back and you're like, thank you, Dad, for
Mm-hmm.
just like redirecting like all of that for me, and then like, you know, you get to sit here now and just like admit those prayers to
Yeah,
him.
I do. I mean, my dad, we've had a complex relationship even until like him physically departing from this world. And it's like still evolving and
Mm-hmm.
growing. And I would say, you know, my dad is like one of my first teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll mean like just like, you know, my teacher of life, but like one of the first like teachers on this path of healing and of like helping other people to heal, a wounded healer in his own right, but like all of the blessed experiences and like teachings he's bestowed upon me started when I was a kid. I mean, like when I was a child, he always was like a standout and like, you know, not fit in with the norm kind of person. I mean, this man would like, we would act like, you know, in moments where like there was a dead animal on the side of the road, we like go and like pull over and like stand together and like say a
Mm-hmm.
prayer.
Yeah.
And like he would rescue all sorts of like wild animals that were injured on the side of the road. And like we would go and spend time outside and like speak to the birds, and like he would point out hawks and like talked to other animals, and was just like so, he was just so connected with earth. And I think a part of why I feel that deep connection is because of what he opened up within me by having those experiences at such a young age. Not to mention, I went deeper into his spiritual path and healing when I was a teenager. It's like I was, or not even a teenager, I would say like 10. Like he was going to meditation class once a week, like, and like transcendental meditation. I would go with my brother and we would go meditate, and then
Mm-hmm.
like doing yoga, and I would go do that, or was going to visit an Rinpoche or a monk, and like would take us with him to these gatherings. And like as a kid, I didn't really understand what it was, but I was like, I'll go, and was having these experiences at such a young age. And then when he met my stepmom and they moved into our house in Bethesda, Maryland, before they departed for Brazil, I mean, that house is haunted, and so all of the non-ordinary experiences that came through that house, and like being a part of that as a teenager. And then when he moved to Brazil, I mean, that opened the door for so many different experiences for him to have and deepen his spiritual practice. But when I would go visit him, and I did every summer and every winter, I was being consistently exposed to all sorts of different like spiritual ceremonies, healings, seances, interacting with a lot of different lineages and traditions, like the Umbanda lineage and tradition of Brazil, or the Santo Daime lineage and tradition of Brazil, and then eventually like being given the opportunity, gifted the opportunity to sit with grandmother ayahuasca. And that wasn't something I ever pursued. I had never been interested in psychedelics. Like, it was something I was like, I don't need to experience, and it was always posed in a more recreational sense when I was younger. And so I never sat with any kind of psychedelic before. And then yet here was this opportunity, like being on the land with my father in the mountains when I was I like 20 or 21?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was, or 19, maybe even 19. I don't know. I was not old, and that was the first moment I was like, yeah, I'm gonna sit and we're gonna do this, and because I'm curious, and like this found me, and it wasn't like a pressure because I know he had been sitting in ceremony and would talk to me about it, and so I was very open to it, but I had never been like, okay, and now I'm gonna explore this, and that was the moment, and I was like, and then that. And you talk about just like, sort of like completely expanding and broadening your consciousness beyond what like it means to go back to sleep. I think that was just another initiatory experience to being like, oh no, like there is much more here. And you're meant to do much more than just be like a therapist or work in community-based mental health. All of these things I'm sharing just because it's like the initiations happened since I was a kid, and like one of the final ones in his embodied state anyway that he gifted to me was guiding him through the door of death. And that, yeah, I mean, you talk about all sorts of things just coming up, and like you experiencing when you're not just like, it's different when you're taking someone to a hospital and like someone else is caring for them and like you're in this very sterilized environment, versus like you're at home where like you spent a lot of time, and like Brazil was my second home for a very long time because I was spending so much time there, and like part of my family was there. You talk about like having someone physical body deteriorate before you, and you being the person to essentially guide them through that deterioration, all the pain, all of the traumatic stuff that comes with deterioration that people don't like to talk about. And then like having to like manage and take care of yourself at the same time, and also like sense into like the approaching door of death. Yeah, it just like, it was an existential, like mind-blowing experience to have. And I mean, there was traumatic dimensions to it that I needed to process because it's heavy. Like a lot of people, most people off put that responsibility onto someone else. And it was just me and my stepmom for months.
Yeah, I've seen in a lot of other countries where it's the family's responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, there's not really any hospital that you take. We're so fortunate here, and maybe not so fortunate in certain ways that we just pass it on to other people, or like, you know, when there is a mental crisis or health issue, it's just like, you go take care of this. Here's some money.
Yep.
You know,
they don't want to deal with it.
Go figure it out. You know, and one of the reasons I got out of you know, college and a lot of the things that I was doing when I was younger was I was actually going to be a child psychologist. So I went to school for that originally, and then I was about to get there, and then I met people that were actually doing it, and I sat down with them and I was like, I want to do this, and they're like, why do you want to do it? And I had wonderful conversations with people, and they just said like you're way too sensitive to do this, and I was like, really? Like too sensitive? Like, you know what I mean? And they're like, yeah, you're going to have to prescribe drugs, and you're going to have to do this, that, and you're going to have time limits with people. Because I was just all about like, let me sit and talk with you.
Yeah.
Let's like work stuff. Stuff out, you know. And they're like, no, you get like 5 minutes, and then you have to prescribe something. You know what I mean? And I was just like, I can't do that. Like, I can't do that to kids. I can't. No. I could like, you know. And so that completely steered my direction when I was younger, and then it led me to hypnotherapy, which I was like, okay, this is another avenue that I can take that still has the dynamic of psychology and, you know, sitting down with people and being able to talk through things. And then I even saw that there was a lot of like, you know, laws and rules all around that as
Yep.
well.
Yep.
You know, then it led me to like life coaching.
Yep.
And then that kind of led to a whole nother realm of like Reiki as well. So like I did a lot of Reiki when I was in India. I got my Reiki masters when I was in Nepal. But I think that'll also open so many doors for me as far as healing, because from a very early age I've always been like extra sensitive to multi-dimensional, like what I've seen
Yep.
stuff since I was very young. I've been in tune with all kinds of things that nobody's been able to explain to me.
Yep.
You know, and especially in you know, when I was younger, more so, there's not many people out there that you can go to. At least these days there's a lot more that you can reach out to as far as people and sitting down and understanding certain things. But at that time it was just like, you know, I was always worried about expressing it to people because it's like, oh, you're crazy, or like you see things, or you feel things, you know, and stuff like that. And it's always been such a treacherous path for me and for many people that experience this stuff as a normalcy, you know. And I had to go halfway across the world to meet other people that were like, no, like you're just more in tune with this, and this is kind of like your life path numbers and your astrology, and this is kind of how the universe like sets you up to experience this stuff. And I was like, it's that simple? And they're like, yeah, it's that simple, it's a normal thing. And they're like, wait, I'm not nuts. And I'm like, you know, I don't like, you know, I'm not like chemically imbalanced and all this other stuff, which I was crazy, which I was told from an early age that I had like different issues or chemical and all this other stuff, you know, that was wrong with me. So like, you know, the more you're told that, no, this is wrong, this is what's wrong with you, you have these problems, you need to take these drugs, and, you know what I mean, like it terrifies children,
of course it does,
of this path. And then like that's also like kind of like a cyclical thing for a lot of people, is that gets inside your head.
It does.
And then as you get older you're like, no, I am crazy, I do have issues, maybe I should take drugs, you know. And it's a perpetuation of that. And that's what's so scary a lot of times in this society, is people become what they most fear because that's what society is telling them. And it wires them from an early age to where they, you know, get into these you know, institute these different places, and it's like they're just normal human beings that have been programmed to feel certain ways. And I'm gonna have another gentleman on next week, and that, you know, was talking about kind of the same thing for you, but more so from a military standpoint, and from people coming back from trauma, and then the treatment that they're receiving, you know, is like so abnormal from what a human being should be given to be healed from trauma.
Especially what they go through.
Especially what they go through.
Which is like something like you can only
you can only imagine. But I mean, I think that everybody deals with trauma in their own way, and I think that it's important to recognize for people that are listening that from somebody that stubs their toe and how they interpret it and how they take it versus somebody that goes through like immense trauma. Everybody's different in how it's absorbed within their body and the placement where it's put. So it's like it's not like the level or magnitude in which like we're supposed to like figure it out. It's just to each their own, and to each their healing and trying to figure it out. But you definitely have to explore all the different people that are out there that are willing to help, like yourself. And that's kind of why I started this, is to show people like there's so many people out there that are trying to make a difference, that have, you know, come through so much themselves to understand that they're here to love and heal, and to show gratitude and to give that to other people as well. And that's why we're here today. You know, and I'm so glad that you're here and able to express these things, because there's so many people that I've met that don't feel like there's any place to go. You know, and that's the scary thing even within our society. Even though there's a lot, I think it's not pushed through certain boundaries to show people that it's right in front of you.
It's covert.
It's very covert.
There's a reason it's hidden too, and there's also a reason why people feel that way. There's an intentionality around making people feel that way, making people feel crazy, making people feel like there's something wrong with them, and not simply something really fucked up and wrong with the society that they're living in. Right? Like it's functional for the system.
Mm-hmm.
It's functional for society. It's functional for us to continue to be cogs in a wheel rather than challenge and want to destroy the wheel.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you start to empower people by saying it's not actually you that's crazy, it's the perspective that people are taking around you and interpreting what's happening inside of you that is saying that that's crazy, like you take your power back in a way. And like a lot of what I'm very passionate about is like, can we hold the narratives that society has like forced onto us that we have become is so internalized and attached to, including diagnoses that have become formative in people's identities at this point. And God forbid you take them away from people. What are they left with? They're left with like such a radical level of like responsibility and self-accountability that they're personally not ready for.
Yeah.
Because they've been told their entire life that like it's like there's something wrong with you, and the only reason there's something wrong with you is because of this thing that's inside of you that has nothing to do with your environment, so you just need to take pills and it's forever going to be a part of your life and there's nothing you can do about it. And then to be told, no, you actually can do something about it, and like you can also do something about it outside of what society is telling you is a normal traditional approach to treatment, and that you're actually not crazy at all, and there's nothing wrong with you, but like, is it going to require you to admit that to yourself and like love yourself enough to find a different path forward beyond like essentially like internalizing this deep level of like hatred and even self-abandonment and like unworthiness and like a lack of value because you have internalized all those narratives from the outside in. Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of courage to break free from, and a lot of people won't do it because it's so scary, because you're not just going against these internal things, you're not just going against these internal stories, you're also going against like the immense amount of power behind what's created those stories in the first place, the life-devouring forces of the world that like feed off of you carrying that story to remain disempowered, to remain asleep, to remain disconnected from who you actually are. And it all serves the system, right? It all serves being the cog in the wheel and like continuing to have society function as is, even though it's slowly killing all of us by existing in that way.
And it's actually killing a lot of younger people these days too.
Exactly, more and more.
More and more all the time, and I see it because I think that's important that maybe we touch on that point really quickly, is that I see that so many people are being stripped of their identity because they're just living so outward and wanting to focus on what they think happiness is for themselves and becoming these other people that they aren't. And I always try to tell people, like, would you rather live for the things that have meaning for yourself rather than like doing what others are doing to like make the money or like getting the likes on like Instagram or like other stuff like that? It's very difficult because when you're stripped of that identity, it's like, who am I? What do I love? What brings me joy, you know, on a daily basis? And I always say, like, start with the small things.
It is.
You know, it's like start with the little things that every day that you wake up with appreciation and then go from that and then kind of find and discover who you are. But it's okay to strip yourself of those things, because I think a lot of happiness comes from actually letting go of what you may or may not think brings that, and then just rediscovering who and what you are and finding those things within yourself and then playing on that and having fun with it. You know, I think it was like a week ago, I was having a conversation with somebody and I was like, name a couple little things that are like really bring you that joy, you know, and they couldn't answer. And I was like, it's like, man, like, you know, like, do you ever think about like those little things? You know, and then for me, I was like, one of the first things that came to mind in the moment was like, I love wind chimes. You know what I mean? And so, like, some other people might be like, that's ridiculous. Like, you know, like, there's silly little things. And I'm like, whenever I'm walking and I just hear them, they bring me so much joy. You know what I mean? And it doesn't have to be for everybody. And people could laugh at that in this podcast or whatever. But for me, that's like, it brings me, it's one of those little things every day, and of
Yeah.
course I don't hear them every day,
Yeah.
but starting with that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, and that's like uniquely who you are. And if you don't find those things in your life that have those little moments, it's like it can be really terrifying that you're looking at the bigger picture. I mean, like it's important.
Totally.
And so like when we're stripped, oh, Kiddo Ben.
Thanks, love.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
What would you recommend, you know, like when people are, you've been stripped a couple times of those things. I myself have, you know, been stripped of those things. What's a good starting point for people to kind of like reevaluate, you know, themselves, and then also finding like who they are, you know, because I'm sure like, yeah, you had that cushy job,
Yeah.
you're making that money,
Yeah.
that was great, but I'm sure you're way happier through all your struggles now.
Absolutely.
You know, and doing what you absolutely love,
Yep,
right?
totally.
And that's important to convey to people out there. It's like,
Yeah.
I needed to be stripped. You know, I needed to let go of that money, that security, all the things that came along with that, to then go back to nothing.
Yeah.
Build myself back up, find what it is that brings me happiness, and then be where you are now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think a part of it is like normalizing death, which is like what we've been talking about. It's like, can we normalize death as a part of living? Like, and I don't mean just like death, our mortality, like our physical bodies dying, although that's a part of it. And normalizing that is really important. And I think that's what was so sacred about the experience I had, because when you distance yourself from the reality that we're all going to die someday, and you're in denial of it, and we are a culture and society that is in active denial of it and trying everything across the sun to prevent aging, preventing like our having to face the mortality that we each carry. I think it's being comfortable with death and understanding that like, the only way that you are going to be able to reap the beautiful benefits and like blossoms and blooms of your life in the highest capacity and expression requires like a lot of fertilizer. And all of that fertilizer comes from things dying.
Yeah.
Like everything that we are gifted and granted in this world, something had to die for. Even if you're a vegetarian, even if you're a vegan, right? Like death is woven into the fabric of existence. And like not honoring it in that way, not acknowledging it, right, is also like dishonoring the sacred part of that process that you in your body is naturally going through all the time anyways. Not on like that massive scale of transition, stepping through the portal of death when you like leave your body for good in this world and in this life, but also like your cells are constantly dying and regenerating every single day. And like death is always happening all around you. And it's also, there's so much life happening and moving through at the same time that's being created because of all the ways in which things are falling away. All the ways in which like things are going back to seed. All the ways in which like the cycles of the seasons of life, you see it around you every year. It's like, it's not always summer.
Yeah.
Like life is not always spring. Like there is deep winter and there is fall. And like those moments, those seasons are all about like shedding and letting go. And then like going deeply inward and like letting things fall away. So like when the seasons of spring come around, you're able to actually plant the seeds more clearly to help the things that you really want in your life take root and then grow and like become alive, right? And if you're not letting go of stuff, if you're in denial and you are in resistance to the things that are naturally falling away in your life, and this is where I see a lot of people get hung up, including myself, because you know it's a learning process. All the deaths I've had to go through, it's not been easy because there are parts of me that have really wanted to cling on to how I thought it was supposed to be, like how I thought things were supposed to go. Even with my dad dying, it was like that was never something I was ever going to consider, at least for him in my life, because he was so healthy. And yet like that's not how it was going.
Yeah.
And like, what did I do? I was no longer in resistance. I mean, there was parts of me that up until he passed away were in resistance to the truth, the inevitable truth of him passing away and leaving his physical body. But like at the same time were there parts of me in full just embracing the reality of what was and just allowing things to die. And not just him die, but there are parts of me that also needed to die in that process too, and like let go of that and just like fully lean in. Yeah, I mean, that's like really hard to do because there are parts of us that don't want that, and yet like so much of the dis-ease that I see in a lot of the people I work with, and even within myself, is by clinging on to the things that are dying in our life, that are falling away. And that's such a human thing. It's so normal. And there's so much fear behind that letting go. There's so much fear behind change, which is why most people refuse to do it. But change involves death, as does, like, you know, and death involves life, and life involves death, and on it goes. You know, like, I love this symbol of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. It's like life emerges through the shedding and through the dissolution of previous versions of ourselves. Like, and literally, like, that is the cycle in which everything functions and operates in this world, in like the sacredness of like nature and all cycles of living. And so why would it be different for us as humans? Right?
Do you think that we can actually, like, I've experienced this, but I've also had conversations with people actually dying in this body, in this lifetime. Do you think that's also like something that we can do? I mean, you grab these animals.
Yeah, you're fine.
My background noise. Come on.
No.
I've had conversations with people where they can actually like transcend what it is in this body and like already die. I've heard it through meditative states, induced states, so that you can free yourself of that illusion, because I think a lot of it is that. And have you ever experienced something like that, or felt that, or anything along those lines?
I think, right, one experience that I'll just like briefly reiterate that we've already been talking about is like reiterating watching someone die. Watching my father die was like very confronting for me, and like so confronting of like his death, but also my own, and like what that is like, what that looks like beginning to end. It was a lot. But outside of that, I have been in ceremonies, specifically sitting with Niños de los Santos mushrooms, psilocybin, where I have, in so many words, experienced all manners of tragic death, and not in peaceful ways. And it was, I think that ceremony specifically, and I've been in many, but like that specific ceremony for me, it was like I really wanted to focus on healing and understanding the roots of a lot of the ancestral pain that was still present within me, that I was carrying as a result of my lineage. Small ask, you know.
Yeah, that's
Just careful what you wish for. And on top of that, the ceremony was also in downtown LA. So
lots going on there.
Light place.
Yes, of course.
And like, mind you, to like just like with like a group of people and all their stuff converging in that space. And it was like, in so many ways, for 4 hours, like all the manners and ways in which I could die in like really messed up ways, like I went through as the person dying again and again and again and again and again. And by the end of it, I was like, I don't know how much more I can handle. And I can tolerate a lot. Like in this life and other dimensions, I'm always so deeply humbled by like, wow, like I can hold a lot. And it was also a lot. Like it was just, I was like, by the end of it, I was like, at the 4 hour mark, I was like, okay, like, is this gonna stop soon? Because I was like, this is a lot. And like, I think anytime you go into an altered state, however you get there, um, you lean into the mystery of what it means to be consciousness beyond this body. And even to the mystery of like what it means, like what does life mean, or consciousness or existence mean beyond like living now as a human being in this moment in this body. And that experience specifically, I was just like, I was like very humbled, and like I honestly think having these confrontations, whether it's in ceremony or like in my lived experiences, even if it's not with someone tangibly, physically dying in front of me, but even just like having to go through the process of surrendering to death, which happens on a grand scale every couple of years. And usually what I found is it happens in a grand scale when you're not listening and letting things go as they're coming incrementally. So it'll compound if you're not listening and happen all at once because you've been ignoring the signs or not wanting to face the music of the things that are falling away or dying in your life. I think all of those things, and I'm not by any means like so 100% comfortable with death, but if I were to die tomorrow, would I feel deeply fulfilled and comfortable with like everything that I've done in my life without regret? Yeah. And you never know, right? You never know if you're going to wake up tomorrow. That's the thing. And so if you treat life as sacred in that way, if you pay attention to the wind chimes, which also like, that's like the song and sound of the wind, which is sacred and allows us to breathe and allows us to speak and literally shapes like the world unseen. Like, if you can pay attention to all of that and take it all in and let your system be in that state perpetually, because you don't know when it's going to end, I feel like, yeah, that for me is like, that settles me for whenever it is that like my time of dying comes. And it's always going to come with every person that's alive. Like,
Yeah.
I think, and that's not a perspective I've held perpetually. That's like an ongoing developing thing.
Always, yes.
That I've needed experiences like I'm sharing with you to have to be able to get to that place. And like, I'm sure even people listening to this are probably like, oh my God, like, that's like, how do you say it? Or people might even be offended when you talk about death in this way because it's treated as this tragic thing. And it is a tragic thing. And like, the thing is, it's like, death is a tragic thing. And like, we can grieve the tragedy of death. And it's not to say that I haven't grieved for my father, for all the moments of like death and dying in my life, for myself or other people. There's an immense amount of grief that comes with that needs to be expressed. And like, that's also, I mean, that's a part of the process. That's a part of living and dying. And it's like, if we're not grieving, then how can we have any gratitude for why we are here and like what it is that we have as far as this beautiful life goes? So grief is foundational to being able to drop into the depth of gratitude that you have for living. And if you don't do that, you're not going to feel fully in embodied gratitude if you can't also grieve for everything that has and continues to be lost in the world. And there's a lot of that loss happening in the day and age.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of loss happening, and I think people don't know how to grieve.
Either. They don't.
There's no time for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like, there's one thing I wanted to say is like, I don't know like the exact or the specifics of it, but I think it's like every 7 years or something like that, every part of our human body is actually like regenerated, you know? So in a weird way, like in that amount of time, we are already died. You know what I mean? So it's like, though we may think that it's like all right here in a strange way, every single day we're letting go a part of ourselves, you know? So I think that's a great metaphor for people to kind of think about and dwell on for a little bit and grieve for, because you should grieve for yourself all the time in a strange dynamic, right? You know, like there's like life is a grieving process for yourself because in that amount of time, and I don't know the exact specifics on that, and I'll probably look that up after we're done. But I know it's like around that time. It's like you're letting go of every piece of yourself, you know. So what does that mean? Like you're already gone, right?
Exactly.
And it's so funny that we're talking about this, really diving into this today too, because oddly enough, it was like just a couple of days ago I did a ceremonial experience for myself to let go of my old self, because I felt like it was taught like I had a birthday not that long ago, but I didn't go through the process that I typically go with for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And like it was just a couple of days ago, I created like a ceremonial experience where I was like, it's time for that person to
Yeah.
like let go.
Yeah.
And I was like, thank you so much
Yeah.
for everything you've done for me. You've taught me so much, but it's time for me to level up,
Yep.
if you will,
Yeah.
you know, in certain ways. And I was like, you know, having that grieving moment for myself. I was like crying for like 15 minutes, just letting go of that grieving and everything that person learned and suffered and experienced, you know.
Yep.
But I was like, hey, it's time for like the new me to kind of embody this spirit and move forward in everything that I'm trying to do for myself, my family, the people around me.
Yep.
So I was like, I had a whole day of grieving.
Yeah.
You know, but for me, amazing. And I'm sure people listening to it were like, that sounds insane.
That's like too much.
Yeah, that's too much. But it was really important for me.
Yeah.
And I do that when I feel like it's time and necessary in my life to upgrade, if you will, because for me, my analogy is always like reaching the glass ceiling, and in order to break that and to evolve and become more of who you are, you also, it's a sacrifice. There's a letting go in that process too. And so for me, it was dying.
Yep.
You know, and like it's hard to explain, and it would take probably an hour to try and get to any point of that.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling you, like, just the way you're looking at me,
I'm
you
like,
have,
oh, I have
you know
things.
that feeling. Yes,
I do. I know that
things.
feeling, and it's actually something I've been like toying with in terms of how can I like implement it into the framework of how I like teach people about how to like navigate the ins and outs of like living and dying and these like microcosms of that cycle in their life now. And like embrace it radically. So a lot of the work that I do is around like somatic experiencing, which is around nervous system regulation and like helping people work through the somatic or body-based responses and residue left over from trauma. And you know, a big piece that's oftentimes missing and not talked about really at all is grief, and how grieving is actually like, you know how they say like fight, flight, or freeze, right? It's like, well, it's like fight, flight, freeze, and appease. Those are the 4 responses. Appease is a less well-known one. But I actually think, and this is just my perspective and like something that I'm like chewing on and want to like dive more deeply into developing as like a methodology, but like grieve is also a response, and it is the missing link in people's lives.
Yeah.
It is. And because if you grieve, then you're not going to go into the spaces of traumatization, because you're ritualizing the experience of living and dying in your life.
Yeah, it's good. Got me.
Yeah.
It's really good.
It is.
Yeah,
it's powerful.
It's powerful, it's important, and I think that, you know, yeah, just to come to that understanding is like really powerful, because I think that finding like the name of creating space, you know, it's like finding that time to create the space to do that. We're so challenged every day, and everything that we're doing is like, it was hard for, like, it was circumstantial in that day, because I'm very attuned to like what I needed that day. And I was like, I'm not going to meetings today. I'm not doing this. I'm going home and I'm doing this ritual for myself. But I had to like force it on myself, you know. And like for so many people out there, it's like, you have to, like, maybe you're not so attuned to it, but you have to find that time for yourself to be like, here's what I'm doing today, or here's what I'm doing this whole week, or this month, or this year, you know, what have you. But it's like, if you ever want to like grow and become more of who you are, you have to find that. It's so essential.
Totally.
You know, and
that's a part of the homework assignment.
It
is.
Everybody listening.
That's part of the homework assignment. Grieve, right?
Yeah.
Because like everyone wants to heal. And they're right about this. Everyone wants to heal, but no one wants to do their homework.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to get to the end of what that healing looks like, but no one wants to go through the messy, painful, deep, dark, sometimes journey that it takes to get to that place. And healing is a choice. And like you're saying, it's like I had to choose. I had to like deliberately choose and like force myself and be like, I'm not working. I'm putting these boundaries up around these other things that are so normalized that I'm taught that I need to do. And in a way you do, right? To live in this world and survive and take care of you and your family. But like I need to actually make space because this is important for me. This is important for like my journey and my self-development. And if like I'm not doing that, if I'm not like maintaining that commitment to myself, then like who am I really? Like I feel like a lot of people, it's like it's really hard to put them, and I speak for myself and also for the people I work with, it's like a very difficult thing to prioritize yourself and like just you and like taking care of you in that deep and intentional way. And especially in a more ritualized and ceremonial way, because in terms of like the society we live in nowadays, most ritual and ceremony is lost on us, especially for these massive transitory states that we all face and go through in life. I mean, there's some like monotheistic approaches to certain moments in life that like are memorialized through religion, and then like right, like marriage and like birthdays and things like that, and like funerals. But it's like it's not enough, because you see the society and the world we're living in today, and if we were living in a more intact society, as one of my teachers likes to say, is like there would be so much more ritual and so much more ceremony around these transitions, because we understand them and honor them as these sacred moments that like impact the trajectory of people's lives and who they actually are.
Do you have like do you create that space for somebody to create like any ceremonial practices for people to go through? And then if you do, can you describe one or some way like you approach it?
Yeah. So I specifically, with people I work with, you know, life is ceremony for me. It has become ceremony. It wasn't always that way. Especially over the last, I would say, 4 years. It's definitely like ceremony and ritual has become a part of like my day-to-day practice. So like I wake up, I sit at my altar, I have like gratitude practice, prayers, opening, greeting the day, and all of the spirits that are a part of it that support me, that have guided me to that moment. All of the like spirits, the animals, the plants of the land, of the place I'm living, like giving, just like pouring gratitude into everything that's allowed me to be alive and supported and held on this path in this moment. And then after I do that, I do some grounding practices, breathwork techniques, and I'll go and greet the sun from time to time, and that takes like an hour and a half. Sometimes I'll sit with rape, which is sacred tobacco snuff. I have like a deeper connection with tobacco, and tobacco spirit. And then, you know, after doing all that, that's like essentially the container and the frame for what I hold people through as I go into my day and work with people, through like trauma therapy essentially, and the work that I do with folks in more individual containers. And so is it like a formalized ceremony then walking people through in the moment in like therapy sessions? No, but is the container that I'm holding for them sacred and being treated as such, and also being open and both closed. So at the end of the day, close it out with like clearing, and like coming back to myself, grounding, clearing my space, and also clearing me, where it's like tightly wound, and there's like things being moved and transmuted and things being acknowledged, and like also just like the space being held in a very, a way that like is reflective of integrity with like what I'm bringing into this space. So I would say like that is like the main ritual and ceremony that I hold for people every single time they step into space with me. And a lot of other formalized rituals that I've done have been more oriented towards like massive transitions or moments in my life. It's not to say that I couldn't lead people through that, but I predominantly work with people. I fully work with people online right now. I'm not doing things in person with folks. It's something I want to change, and it's going to change in the not so near future. It's going to shift, and at the same time, a lot of what I do is around just like creating offerings. I mean, again, life is ceremony for me. So it's like being able to just like every day, if I'm going to a certain place, if I'm like offering a song or have a beautiful experience on a piece of land, like speaking to the land, speaking to the animals, the plants, the spirits of that place, especially the indigenous stewards and original keepers of that land, and just like being like very respectful and like with gratitude, honoring like their essentially like safe passage of like being able to be on that piece of property or land, and like not have anything bad happen to me, and like be able to like enjoy the beauty and like the vitality that comes through by being able to participate with land and with all the beings that are there. And that those are just small rituals that I do. And then sometimes, like yesterday, my partner and I, we did a ceremony, and I won't go into too much detail because sometimes these ceremonies are like just between you and the sacred, right? But it's really, we did a ceremony that really was, again, just like honoring the gratitude, the magnitude of like what needed to essentially come forward in each of our respective lives to bring us together to create this union, and like just creating an offering and a ceremony and ritual specifically around just honoring all the forces that conspired to bring us together. Which was really powerful and beautiful.
That's neat.
Yeah, and like not something I've ever done with someone before, especially in a romantic relationship, but so needed, especially because of how my life has evolved over the course of 4 years, and especially with consideration to like the way in which we met. The level you talk about, like we were talking about like the synchronicity and like the, you know, the ball rolling and like all these different moments compounding and creating the person that you are today. Like talk about synchronicity. I mean, like there are so many moments that had it happen exactly as they did, and so many tiny little details that needed to happen exactly as they did for us to connect. And it's so beautiful and also just a wild thing to consider at the same time.
I know that exact same feeling. I met my wife at a very strange time in my life, and just the experience of like where we met and that one moment was like so magical. And it's funny, like, you know, so many people like are, when you let go of like the seeking, you find who it is that you're looking for.
Absolutely.
And it's so funny because people are like, no, like you need to do the X, Y, and Z and to like figure this out, and like swipe left and swipe left, like right, you know, like all the time, like this is the way you do it. And it's like, no, it's like when you let go of all of that is like what I tend to find is like when love comes, you know.
Totally.
And you're opening that heart chakra part of yourself that is the allowance, you know. And I think it's so necessary, especially with love, because I think we confine it so much for what it is. But I have a feeling that for every person that comes and sees you, it's so unique, you know, because you're also like tapping into like who they are and like what they're needing, the energies.
Absolutely.
Do you ever like for yourself, because you've done Reiki and all, it sounds like a lot of other things, do you feel or see energies like with people and like what they might need or like anything like that?
Yeah.
From the second they walk in the door?
Yeah, the virtual door, right?
Yes.
It depends, and I think while that is the case with like a lot, I mean, I am predominantly a seer. I see things that, I mean, I sense in my body what's happening. I'm really clairsentient, but I would also say like the thing that feels the most clear for me is sight. That's how things are usually like transmitted to me and how I experience things. And while that doesn't always happen all the time with my clients, there are moments where things feel very clear, and at the same time, I, you know, sense being more open to my gifts and more open to just how I receive information in these multidimensional ways. I am very careful in discerning how and when, and if I even should share some of the things that come through. I think having that level of attunement to people is a beautiful thing, and I also think a lot of people think that because they have that level of attunement, they can just then tell people what they're perceiving and experiencing from a person without like actually asking for consent or permission to do so. And sometimes it's not, you know, with clients, and like it feels in resonance and alignment with sharing to help better support them, it's different. But there's some moments where I've had transmissions or things I've experienced related to other people that I haven't shared with them because I know it's not my responsibility and it's not my role, and it's like that's something that they're gonna have to arrive at their own, in their own time, at their own pace.
Lifetime.
Exactly. To not preemptively like step on their cosmic toes, if you
Yeah.
will, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like it's maybe not, like you can foresee that it's not even this lifetime that they're gonna figure it out? It might take them a couple more times. That
Yeah,
you're like
yeah,
this isn't even right for me now. Like you need to figure this out. It's gonna take you a while, kind of thing, or
totally.
heal from some trauma that happened to you that might take a little bit longer, and just go with it and just be find the peace and knowing that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of the relationships in my life, romantic and platonic, that I've had to let go of
Mm-hmm.
are reflective of that understanding that the places that I'm going and the pace and the trajectory in which I'm going are out of alignment with like where this person is on their path. It's not that I'm better, it's not that they're worse. It's not about hierarchically organizing things, but more just like there's a deep lack of resonance and alignment here.
Mm.
And it's like there are other things that you have to learn before we converge again, whether it's in this life or another. And it's not to say that their relationships or their roles in my life weren't sacred or important, or that I harbor any kind of anger or resentment towards them for like being on their path and it not being in alignment with mine. But it's just different. And like it's a part of like this life and death and like rebirth process that we're always going through. Like relationships are also not, they're no exception to that too. They are a part of that process. Like we have to go through relationships, and like not every relationship is meant to last forever.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the
No,
cells in
that's
our
a hard one.
not the cells in our body are
Yeah.
not meant to like last forever either. Yeah, it's like
Give me
things
chills
are
for that.
constantly like being moved and recycled, and things are showing up in our life for a very specific purpose and reason to propel us forward into the next relationship or the next connection or the next embodiment of our evolution and of our journey. And I've had many relationships and lost a lot of relationships where I also knew that like the loss, the death of that iteration of the relationship was the propelling force that brought me to all this other beautiful, like all these beautiful blessings in my life. Like without those relationships, I wouldn't have been able to arrive at this place.
Yeah, I've gone through that the past couple of years, and a couple different traumas and
Yeah.
experiences of losing people that were so important to me
Yeah.
in my life, and it's like, oh my gosh, like like the clinging, like I want to hold on to it so bad, but it's like at the same time, if you truly love something, you can let it go. Because you can show the appreciation for what it was and what it taught you. And I think that the letting go of something, like an appreciation, is such a teaching.
Yeah,
But
it
it's
is.
like so hard.
Because you're human.
Yes, it's so hard.
You
It's so
have an
hard to
attachment
do that
system. Yep.
too.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, like I've felt that so strong. I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in the past couple of years is like developing relationships with people for so long, and then realizing that they gave you everything necessary for you to grow, but then letting
Absolutely.
go, and it's like, oh man,
Yeah.
that's not an easy one. And
No.
I think people need to understand the depth and the meaning of what that is for them at that time, because I've known older people that like look back and they're still holding on to it.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh man, like you still haven't that was 25 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Like you need to let go of
They're
that
not
stuff.
grieving.
Like, yeah, they're not grieving, and they're not going through the natural process of like burying it in the ground and sprouting a tree from it. Like it's so necessary. But man, it's part of the human nature to just hold on as tightly as we can.
Absolutely. Change is so difficult. Loss is like so painful, and it's inevitable.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that it's so necessary to learn how to heal too. Like I think Reiki is such a instrumental tool for me that's taught myself that we can heal. We have the capacity for ourselves, for things around us.
Yeah.
And so it's such an important tool. And I think that one of the most beautiful things about Reiki is it's like a gift that anybody can share. And like, I think a lot of times what is scary to me, especially within this society, and I've met other Reiki masters where they're like, I've learned how to do this because I took all these classes and I'm like great, and it's like I can only do this, And it's like, no, it's like there's so
No.
much ego that derives from that. It's like it's anybody can do it.
Yep.
Like it's just it's something you tap into.
Yep.
And like for me, when I started evolving on the meaning of those terminologies, I realized like, yeah, there's certain things that will help guide you, like symbols
Mm-hmm.
and certain like projections within yourself. But at the same time, you can also create those things for
Yep.
yourself. It doesn't have to be
Absolutely.
so confined by somebody else's perspective. You can
Yeah.
find the healing tools within yourself and develop your own
That's your medicine.
Reiki, whatever you want to do for yourself, and go give that to other people, and you
Yeah.
can create your own mastery for
Yeah.
that. And I want to share that. I'm glad you're conveying that message too. Is anybody listening,
Yeah.
you know, anybody can heal, and they can find that
Totally.
within themselves too. It doesn't have to be this like, I went to this school and I did this and da da da. It's like, no, you can sit in meditation and like find that within yourself
Yeah.
to heal yourself and people around. Practice
Absolutely.
practice on yourself.
Yep.
You know, practice on your animal. You know
Yep.
what I mean? Like it's
Exactly.
because everything needs healing, and when you dive really far into it, you realize that it's not just like these like living things around you. It's like this couch.
It's everything.
Like this desk needs
It's
healing.
literally everything.
You know, because
well, everything
like,
comes from the earth.
yeah, it's
Even
like,
if it's synthetic, I
mhm.
mean, it comes from here. It was created
Yeah,
here.
you can heal your house. I mean, because there's a lot of love and pain
Yeah.
and all different kinds of things that come with it, and the cleansing of where you live and the things you bring into your house. It's all like everything needs healing, you know. So
Everything.
don't ever stop yourself from like looking at the inanimate things that you're just like, oh, that's just a thing. It doesn't have any feelings.
But it totally
It
does.
does. It comes with it.
Yeah,
you
I
know?
mean, I feel that. It's like, I am very grateful for my car, for all the beautiful
Mm.
places that it has taken me.
Yes.
But like the level of love that I give to it, I honestly think is it's a reflection of like how it has taken care of me too, and vice versa. It's like what you're feeding feeds you.
Mhm.
And like what are you feeding these things,
Yeah.
right? Like you're like they've done studies on this where like they literally film plants. They have all the same physiological conditions related to sunlight, water, fertilizer, and like literally all that is different is like some plants are being spoken to in really loving, compassionate, like caring ways, and the other plants are being spoken to in like very hateful, very angry, very resentful ways. And what happens? The ones that are being spoken to in those hateful, angry, and resentful ways, they die.
Yeah.
And like that's also people are like, oh, it's woo woo probably, and I'm like, but also at the same time, if you think about sound, and you think about where sound comes from. Right? It's like sound is like connected to us being able to manipulate and like master essentially air, which is like the element of the wind, and creates very specific frequencies in the air for us to transmit and communicate some of the most powerful forces that have been used to like create amazing, beautiful movement-based things in this world, or the power to destroy and kill so many people. And it's all done through words.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's so like, it's like if you don't understand that your words mean something, not just externally, but internally too, like if you don't understand that all the words, all the stories you're telling yourself inside, you just think that they're falling on deaf ears within you and that it's not impacting your capacity to heal or not heal yourself, like you are mistaken.
Absolutely.
You're very mistaken. And I love what you were saying earlier too about, you know, everyone has the capacity to heal. I think there's this sort of, especially like in this day and age where there's like lots of people like, I am a healer. It's like if you're going to someone for healing, you are going to them so that that person can help you tap into whatever it is you need to tap into within yourself to heal yourself. They are not healing you. They're holding that curious like space for you to dive more deeply into all the resilience, all the strength, all the capacities, all the gift, all the medicine that you have inside of you to be able to heal. They're not gifting it to you because, as you were saying, and like as we've been taught in like Usuri Reiki, it's like Reiki energy is life force energy. It's prana. It's like something that moves through every single thing, inanimate or animate or whatever you want to call it in this world. And because it does that, you have that inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And like you can use your energy, whether it's like your mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual energy, to direct and redirect it inside of you to promote healing. Do you need guidance and mentorship and support to figure out how to do that? Absolutely. But does that mean that the only way for you to do it is if someone gives it to you or tells you what to do?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's also a part of, that's just more conditioning and distortion that's related to our healthcare system, which is like there's something wrong with you, but the only person that can fix it is your doctor
Yes.
or your psychiatrist or this little happy pill,
Mm-hmm.
or your therapist even, right? Your therapist is the only one that can fix
Yep.
you, right? And like there's that, there's a level, there's serious levels of distortion in the therapy field,
yeah.
for sure. And it's like because I have X, Y, and Z training and I have these 1,000 letters next to my name, therefore you should trust me, and I'm the only one that really knows how to do this well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like some of the worst people I've ever met in my life have had many, many letters next to their name and have gone through all these certifications and trainings. It doesn't make them a good human. And at the end of the day, like that is what matters the most. It's like the person that is holding that space for you, are they in integrity with themselves and with their own healing? Like you cannot be working with someone who is out of alignment in their own journey and trying to help you get to the places you want to get to when they haven't even gone there themselves. I talk about this a lot. It's like you can't put the carriage before the horse, and a lot of people like to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a level of power, there's a level of status,
yep.
there's a level of reputation, and there's something to be fulfilled and gained through the ego by existing in that pedestal, right? But healing is not about being on the pedestal. It is the opposite. It is the opposite. It's about like, it's like we're all on the same playing field. We are, and it's like how are we going to converge and connect with one another and support one another to get to that same place? Yeah, I could go on.
Oh yeah,
I could go on about that.
I see that a lot. And
Yeah.
Some of the people that I've admired in my life too, and then even like when you meet them, they kind of go off the Richter scale with it starts becoming power, and then
Yeah.
the ego starts getting, and then it just starts going to this like dark wizardry of
Nope.
like people trying to be more, and then I know more and more, and then I'm the only one who can help you, and then you're like, whoa, like where is this going? Like where's this going? You know.
Wish you the best.
Yeah, and it's just it's so crazy. Some of the people that you know I've known and then to follow, and I'm not going to name names,
Yeah.
but they start getting to this level where like people are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars like on these programs,
Yeah.
and it's like you can gain a lot from it, but I think that also there's a lot of teachings in there that are leading people astray from like their own internal teacher.
Totally.
You know, like everything you'll ever need to know and the greatest teachers you'll ever find are already within you.
Within you, or they're like literally in the earth, they're in the
doing
land, they're like in all the beings that are around you, right? It's not like this one person that is serving as the gatekeeper to all the secrets and answers of the world and the universe.
I feel like there becomes more every time I look outside or go on not television but like different platforms, there's like all these gatekeepers to all these different things. It's like you need to spend, you know, $10,000.
People will.
And you're like, oh my gosh, like what are you gonna give me with that? You know, if anything, I would like there to be more teachers out there that are giving more of themselves without having to spend that money, and at least showing people that like everything that I'll be teaching you is just a reflection of yourself, telling yourself of what you need to do, and like make it more malleable so that you can figure out what works best for yourself, so that you can heal yourself. Because I think a lot of times what's so honestly fucked up is like they give you these guidelines that like don't really follow the path to the source of yourself and the true healing. And there's like, you could take this way and this way, but this is the way you need to figure out everything. And if you don't do one of these, you're never going to find it. And then people never find it. You know what I mean? And that's one of the scariest things where I see a lot of this, the woo woo, like healing stuff that's out there these days, is because it's like this side of the road or this side of the road.
It's extreme.
It's very extreme. And it's like, I really wish that more teachers would go back to their roots of where they started, knowing that that's what they're essentially supposed to give to people.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And I've loved that the past couple of podcasts I've had I've been able to meet people that embrace that, you know, and are essentially helping somebody find their path so that they can heal themselves.
Yep.
And I think that's so important that we just constantly do that.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for doing that, for embracing that, and showing other people that it's a necessity.
It is. It's such a necessity. And like, it's like not, the healing journey is not a one size fits all approach. It's also not linear. From my own personal experiences, I've learned that. And, every space that I curate for folks, whether it's in an individual container or even the group based container that I'm offering to folks now, it's all curated around like their intentions. It's around them. It's like their desires and dreams and wants are the center of like where we're going. It's like that is like the North Star that we are constantly orienting to again and again and again. And the reason why I feel like a lot of clients have and continue to stay with me and experience such profound change, albeit through lots of cycles of death and rebirth, because that's a part of the process, and normalizing that along the way for folks who like lives will fall apart and then fall beautifully and seamlessly together as a result of shedding and letting go. Like, it's so profound because the orientation is not towards a specific modality or approach or like timeline or trajectory or like regimented phases. It's literally just oriented towards like, I set the frame, like I was talking about earlier, like here's the frame that I'm holding for you, and then it's a little bit more logistical at the beginning. It's like, here's what you can expect, here's what you cannot expect. This is a co-created space. We're gonna practice radical self-accountability and ownership, and like if you don't step in, nothing's gonna change. And I'm here to support you, but I'm not here to heal you. It's just a combination of everything we already talked about today. And then it's like, here are the intentions. We did dedicate a whole session to that, and it's like, all right, now you get to decide what you want to bring in. And like, I have a way of weaving us back to the North Star that are your intentions. And like, that is what we're going to constantly be anchoring and grounding back into. And if we do that, which we do, it's just like so much.
I think that's so important. I'm really glad you just touched on that. Is like, it's important to have that person there to create the space for you, but also to bring you back to like, you went on a tangent, or like you went this way, but you got it. Like, remember what we were talking about. Like, you need to stay focused on that North Star. Like, this is where we're heading. And I think that's so important to find somebody that has the background and capability and knowledge base and experience for everything that you've done. That it's important to do that in a sacred, loving space with somebody to ground them and constantly, like, put them back on the earth and be like, see, that's where we're going. And just do that over and over and over again, because I think it's so easy for people to get lost.
Absolutely. Well, what is ceremony? Like, when you're in an altered state or non-ordinary state of consciousness, what do you think is happening? It's like, here's all the stuff, you like get lost in space, and then it's like, here is why you're here. Like, we're going back to this is your purpose, and like, this is what your intention was, and we're going to do deep work around that. It's like, all right, we're doing it, and then we get lost, and it's like, and then we come back, right? It's like, it's just this beautiful dance, because like, we're holding our humanity, we're holding our divinity, and then we're trying to find a way to like seamlessly merge them together, because that's what life is.
That's a great teacher to me, is because you found that ability to do that for people, but also doing such a loving embrace for people, knowing that like you're helping them work through whatever it is to like find that, and not everybody can do it. No. And I think it takes a lot of, like, people think like, oh, that's so easy to do. You just like, you remind somebody, and it's like, no, that took like your entire life from when you were younger to learn how to do that for somebody. And people that are listening, for myself, that have worked with shamans and wizards and all this other stuff, like the simplest things sometimes take thousands of years to figure out. It's not, so we're like, you're like, oh, I can go learn how to remind somebody to get back on their path to do this. Like, no, it's not that easy. It comes from so much more than just like words.
It is. It's a feeling. It's like a felt sense, and it's also like how it's holding all different aspects of a person and their personality and their conditioning and their history, right? That comes with all of their humanity, and then their essence and like their purpose and like their highest expression of self in the mix in a contained way, and also in a grounded way that helps regulate their body and their nervous system, right? To hold all of that and then still find the path forward. and like have them feel held and being able to grieve the things that like they're not ready to let go of and that they're holding so deeply onto, and honoring that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also being like, we can honor that, and this is where we're going.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to
It
do,
isn't.
and to try and not let the other like things that other thoughts like fester too. Like you have to internally create that space
exactly
for somebody, and it takes a lot of learning to be able to do that for somebody too. Because I've done it for people, and it's like people can get frustrated at you and all these other things, but you have to just genuinely focus and keep that space for somebody. It's a lot of practice.
It is, and it's like it requires like such a level of like loving, soft accountability, and just like holding people in love through all the different expressions of feeling that come through, all the defense mechanisms, all the protectors, and just like allowing it and not like, you know, responding back and like influencing and putting our projections into the space, because that's what makes therapy and like the spaces that hold for people on an individual and a group basis unique. It's like, I'm not the center. Like our relationship is not the center. The person is the center, and I'm holding the frame.
Yep.
Right? And that's a very different experience than like the relationships that you have in your life on a personal level, because it's like you're in the relationship with that person and they're in a relationship with you, and you have this third container that is the relationship that you're creating together, but with a person specifically that you have. Right, I guess it's like, right, it's like, it's the same, but it's also different, because it's like the relationship that you have with your clients is not the central focus. It's the person, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's the focus. That's the intention. It's the person themselves.
Yeah. Are you good on timing? You want to keep on going? Or
what time is it?
I don't.
You're like, we're just going.
I'm just going. Tattoos. I saw the tattoo on your back of the wolf. What does that mean to you? Because we were talking about our Boris. I also have that as a tattoo, which was really funny. And then I also have a wolf on my arm too. I love it. So it's interesting that I saw that. So what is that?
Well, the tattoo just weaves in so seamlessly to what we've been talking about. So I got my wolf tattoo in memorial for my dad after he passed in 2016. And I got it on my back. And I got it because he was always very connected to wolves. And I also, as a result, love them too. And I was like, I just wanted to memorialize him, and also just like that as an initiation, an initiatory experience in my life that was like a huge transition, and like essentially like marking the scars from that experience on an external front, as a memorial, as a beautiful like offering and a reminder. It's really interesting because I've been doing a lot of like deeper dive paternal lineage related work, specifically work related to the masculine and to my father over the last year specifically. That's been an ongoing process for me since he's passed, but especially this last year, it felt really important to dive more deep into that. So a lot of my ceremonial work and personal healing work and wellness related sessions that I pursued for my own well-being and health have been oriented towards that intention. And I actually sat more recently in like a 3-part combo ceremony with Dr. Tasha. And the first ceremony, it was very clear, again, like just getting visual confirmation that it's like there's stuff on my back that I really needed to like let go. It's like this like sticky, gooey substance, like energetically, that was just like lingering, that needed to be cleared, that was related to my intentions for going to ceremony, which is related to like healing the paternal, healing the masculine, healing my relationship with my dad. And so I told her that at the beginning of the ceremony, and she's like, okay, we're going to put the points on your back. And I was like, are they going to be on my tattoo? And she's like, yep. And I'm like, okay, yep. And it was so interesting because it was like, right, like all that work that I was doing was being reflected in my body on the place that I got a tattoo to memorialize my dad. And so I got four burn marks and had 4 points of medicine placed on my tattoo for the first ceremony. But that's what it means. And just like a really, again, just a reaffirmation of like the power of just like how things just become aligned and are so synchronized in terms of just making sense. And I was like, is it gonna scar? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, I'm not here for like just the aesthetic projection and image oriented presentation of myself. Like I'm here to go all in and be impeccable and being in embodied integrity
Mm.
with my mission and also my work, right? And I was like, so fuck it. If it leaves marks and scars on my tattoo,
Yeah.
so be it.
Yep. Scars are important.
They are.
They represent a lot, and I think for me, like the wolf is like, or at least in the storyline that means something to me for like the Native American aspect is the wolf is the great teacher. It'd come to you at night, and transform, morph into this teacher and sit by the fire and talk and discuss all these things and pass this great wisdom, and then kind of turn back and go back into the night. And I think it's just like to me that means like a lot in all different traditions and stories and all that kind of stuff, but that's kind of what it means for me. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, it's so cool, and I got my tattoo, or at least this tattoo, like in Nepal at a very transitional time in my life, which was the 22 23, because I was there there about a year. And so that's when I got it, and it means a lot to me too, like in that space. With all my tattoos, because they all mean something.
So for sure,
for me, like the good ones, the bad ones,
it's like it's marking a moment.
It's for me. It's like it's marking a moment in my life, and for me, every time I see it, it's like the things that people can't take away. Because so much can be taken away in this day and age that for me, I'm like, nope, it's mine. I put that money into it,
and like here it is.
And it's like it's also a lot of like sacred geometry too. Like I feel like and all the different symbolic values that I put on myself, they also come with a resonance too. So
absolutely,
it's so many different things.
There's so many different things, and like. Yeah, I mean, to put something like that on your body, like there has to be intention. Or I mean, for me, that's like right. There's always intention. I feel like people like put tattoos in their body. But for me, it's like I don't know. And I have another one here, another initiatory experience, like a massive one. And it's like go big or go home at this point. I'm like all of them are going to be large, but it's like it's very much like an intentional thought out thing, and it's like a ritual and a ceremony in of itself because you're marking this moment, right? And it's like it's an experience of pain, but also beauty, right? And like you're having to like essentially create some like element of death and destruction by like creating and putting something on your body, but there's also life that's being brought forward through the artistry of expressing yourself through what you're putting on your body.
Blood and the ink. Exactly. It's so funny too because for myself, I didn't grow up with much tradition or religion or anything like that. I've been seeking it my entire life. I think also I feel blessed because for my partner, for example, it was ingrained into her life, so she had to do this like drainage process to then get back to like find what her meaning is and all of it. For myself, I feel blessed because I didn't have it in certain regards, but I've sought it out, and like one of the traditions is kind of like getting tattooed in a way, it's that finding the right person too. Like I've met so many tattoo artists from the second I meet somebody, like I look at their energy field and I'm like, nope, you're not tattooing me.
No,
you know what I mean? Because like you're not even enjoying what you're doing right now.
Exactly.
I mean, like it was funny because I think it was like a year and a half ago I went and met some like famous tattoo artist, and like the second I walked up to him, I was like, no thank you. And I was like, you don't even look like you enjoy, like you're getting paid stupid money to do this, but you look like you're not even having fun. Like you're just like, oh, fucking another work day, and I'm like, why would I want that drilled into me? Even though you do amazing work,
doesn't matter.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Like I wouldn't want that energy being like put into my body.
No.
And it's taken me so many years to like find different people that I like would even want to get it done.
It's an intimate experience.
It's a very intimate experience.
It's like energy work.
Yeah, and it's like it's sad. I may rephrase it. It's not sad. I wish that people would look deeper into that, into just going and finding some random person to put that into them. Because if they're looking to like have their mother's like ghost put on their body, and it's not coming with that love that should be the intention behind it. It's like, you shouldn't be doing that. I mean, like, if someone's not enjoying what they're doing, like, in anything that they give, right? It's just like, I don't know.
Not to mention, like, the entities that you're inviting in, depending on, like, what you're actually putting on your body, too. That's a whole nother dimension
that's
of it.
That's a whole nother
like
story.
Other portals you're opening.
I've seen some crazy shit.
Some crazy dark shit on people. I'm like, whoa, you're gonna put that on you?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's funny too, like, now that you mention that, I've seen people that have put a lot of, like, wacky stuff on themselves, and they've also lived that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, you're transcripting your own, like, storyline through doing what you want to have done to yourself. You know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of freakish.
It is.
You know, it's like,
it's freakish, but it also, unfortunately, it makes sense.
Right? Yeah, it totally does. But yeah, I don't put anything that like on my body that I have so much intention or like meaning for myself. You know, because I've had a lot of people like ask me like, oh, like, why did you do that kind of thing? And it to circle back around to, it's always funny because just like the first question that we started off with is like, people come in, they're like, what do you do? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's your identity.
Yes,
that's who you are.
Yes, and it's like, oh, I do this, and they're like, okay, that's good enough for me. And it's like, I've been trying to like figure out how to even start off these podcasts to like intentionally set the right question to kick things off, but at the same time, I'm like, oh man, like, it's one of those questions that comes with so much like
where do you begin?
Yeah, where do you begin with all of that? Because like, even when you said it today, I was like, oh man, I feel that, because so many people ask me that too.
Yeah.
And like, for me, like, at this point, like, when people ask me, I'm just like, I'm a jack of all trades.
Exactly. I'm multi-dimensional.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I don't know what that means, and I'm like, sometimes I don't either.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for this podcasting, I would like it to become something that I do all the time. Like, I love these experiences of meeting new people and ultimately sharing these stories. So I think this is what it's all about, and,
it is.
And showing people that there's a lot of people out there that care and are trying to make a difference. And I hope that that's obviously what we conveyed today.
Definitely.
You know, and like we were saying a while ago, it's in front of you. You know, there's a lot of the healing, and a lot of the people that are there are right in front of you. You kind of just have to tune your frequency a little bit to understand that everything that you need is right in front of you. But in this day and age, in this society, it's pushed away from you, and a lot of other forces are making you think that you have to travel across the world to find it, when really there's people right down the street like yourself that you can exchange some energy and make a difference in your life, and for people to hold space for you, and for you to become the teacher that you need to be to find the healing. And I'm honored that there's so many people like yourself. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for having this wonderful conversation today. And I think we can close it out if you'd like to let people know how they can contact you. And best, like, email or all that kind of stuff. So if you want to share that.
Definitely happy to share. Yeah, a lot of people that find me through Instagram. So Of Sacred Space, that's OFSACRED space, and that's on Instagram. You can also email me at Arielle@ofsacredspace.com. Or send me a contact form at ofsacredspace.com, and I'll respond. But that's really like the best way to get in touch with me. I work with people on an individual and group basis, and I'm currently like enrolling people in my group-based container. Individual caseload is currently full and has been indefinitely for some time.
Wow, that's great.
It is, and also it's like I'm also trying to transition and serve people on a greater scale. And I think like in terms of like what is possible, group-based work matters, and also like the medicine that people receive from being in community with people who are in integrity with doing this work it's hard to find. And so I'm really grateful that you're even creating a space like this and this podcast to like help people bridge that gap and find community that actually resonates with them to walk this path with impeccability.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And yeah, I really look forward to speaking with you again.
Yeah.
This was wonderful. I feel like there's so much that we can talk
about.
Oh,
yeah, there's a lot more.
Yeah, we touched on like a couple of different things, but they were really powerful, and I hope that, people can see that there's so much meaning to life, and there's a lot of healing out there.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.